You've decided you're ready to become a parent, and suddenly you're overwhelmed with people who feel they have the right to inform you on the correct way to conceive, give birth, what fears you should have, and the proper way to parent. How do you filter through the opinions? How do you know what's trustworthy information and what's a myth or just plain outdated? Welcome to the Birth Ease podcast. Join your host Michelle Smith and her guests as they cut through the noise and fear by sharing valuable tips, tools, and proven methods that help you connect with your own inner wisdom as you navigate the sacred journey that is pregnancy, birth, and parenthood in a more relaxed and confident manner. This podcast does not constitute, nor is it intended, as medical advice.
This episode and its introduction was recorded on April 11th, 2020. Hello, Birth Ease families. Welcome to this heartfelt space. I'm your host, Michelle Smith. As we are navigating this pandemic of the coronavirus, I felt that having this conversation with Jen Larsen, who is a trauma-informed yoga instructor, would be especially valuable. In our conversation, she offers, this pandemic is inviting us to have the opportunity to pause, to go within, to listen to our body, listen to ourselves, and listen to our spirit in a way that we may never have done before. It is an invitation for healing and transformation. Jen Larsen is the founder and owner of Inner Glow Wellness, LLC. Through holistic life coaching and trauma-informed yoga instruction, she is dedicated to helping individuals unveil their inner glow and embody their greatest potential in body, mind, and spirit. Her education includes graduate work in the psychology of consciousness and in psycholinguistics. She is a 16-plus year certified yoga and meditation teacher, registered with Yoga Alliance. In addition to coaching and teaching yoga, she is a public speaker and radio personality on topics of health and wellness, particularly the power of the mind and the effects of gratitude and positive thinking on physical health. Welcome, Jen, to the Birth Ease podcast. I am so excited to have you here with me today.
I am thrilled to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
You're very welcome. I feel with everything that's going on with COVID-19, people are under so much more stress and strain. Birthing women are really facing some unprecedented situations, and only being able to have one support person present. They may have to choose between their partner and their doula. Doulas are having to provide virtual support in many cases. As a birth worker, doulas making that tough decision if you want to go into the hospital to provide support, if you have small children, or if you have elderly parents or people you live with. So it's really, as you know, and the audience knows, such a difficult time right now. So I think this conversation regarding yoga, and not just yoga, trauma-informed yoga, is so incredibly timely.
Yes, what we're experiencing now is absolutely unprecedented and, disturbing on a lot of levels. So whatever tools we can have in our toolbox to keep ourselves grounded, centered, and as calm as possible are just so needed. And it's been an amazing tool for so many, for me, for the students that I work with. So yes, I agree with you. Trauma-informed yoga is an amazing tool, and I am so happy to be here and share what I know with your listeners and basically anybody who would like to listen.
I think this interview will be beneficial to so many people, whether they're pregnant or not, whether they have children or not. But I do know as a parent, and having been a parent for 34 years consecutively, that The more grounded and centered we are as a parent, the more secure our children are going to feel, the less meltdowns they're going to have, and the more harmonious our house is going to be. If we're off, our children feel it and they respond accordingly.
Absolutely. We're the ones who set the weather, so to speak. If
Mm-hmm.
it's 75 and sunny with us, then that's how it will be with everyone. And if it's blustery and raining, then they're going to feel that too.
Right, right. And it's not to say that we can't have bad days, but we also can model how we handle those bad days.
Absolutely. In fact, I just recently explored a new concept called an anger workout with my 9-year-old,
Mm,
where, this is normal, right? We're going to have these emotional ups and downs, and it's important to let them out and give them an appropriate place to go and then down regulate back to our usual state. So she was kind of freaking out a little bit about something and getting really upset. And I said, hey, let's go outside and let's take this cardboard box and this wiffle ball bat and let's just bang on it a little bit and let's make some sounds and let's get this anger out. And she looked at me kind of amused, like, really? I said, yes, let's do it. So we went outside, we beat on the box a little bit, we yelled a bunch, and she said, I feel so much better. So that is our version of an anger workout. Sometimes we'll punch a pillow. Anger in itself is not a bad thing. It can be a very mobilizing factor for change.
exactly.
But when it doesn't have the right outlet, it can do some damage. So we found that very helpful.
That is just perfect. That's perfect. Let's delve into what brought you to this work and explain just an overview of yoga and how trauma informed yoga is different from traditional yoga.
What brought me to this work originally, I'm going to go way back 20 years ago to what brought me to yoga in the first place. I actually stumbled over yoga when a friend invited me to go to a yoga class, and I had really no idea what that was. Didn't really know what to expect, but I had an open mind and I went. And it was a more, call it energetic version of yoga. It was a kind of a power yoga class. And I wasn't expecting it at all. And it made me feel so energized and calm at the same time. My mind was quiet, my body was still. Basically, where it put me after a 90-minute practice was really just amazing to me. I never really felt quite so calm and alert. So I was hooked from the start. I had a pretty consistent practice of my own several years, and then I decided to become a yoga teacher because I felt like the way that it made me feel was so powerful. I just wanted to share this with other people. That was about 16 years ago. So yoga is a thousands-year-old practice from India. The word yoga actually derives from yuj, which means to yoke, to bind two things together. And the things that are being bound are the mind and the body. So through this practice, this 8-limbed practice, there are 8 different components to what yoga is. Here in the West, we're pretty familiar with movement and breath. That's usually what we think of. But there are other elements as well, kind of moral observances, how to be a good person within yourself, with other people, how to focus and concentrate. So all these different elements put together make yoga what it is. And a couple of years ago, I was reading a book about trauma in the body. So my background before yoga is in psychology and the psychology of consciousness. So kind of like neuroscience, what the relationship is between the brain and the experience that we have as a mind, as a soul, as a spirit. So kind of the philosophy of psychology. So I love books about the brain and about the self. So I was reading this book called The Body Keeps the Score by Bessel van der Kolk about how trauma is stored in the body and how yoga is an effective treatment modality for post-traumatic stress. And when I read this, I was just riveted, like, oh my goodness, I'm a yoga teacher. I have these tools that can really help people on this deeper level. And not to say that the yoga that I was teaching wasn't helping people on other levels, it absolutely was. But the idea that there's this mental health component, especially with my background in psychology, it sort of brought everything full circle to me. So I contacted the organization that put out the book, the Trauma Center in Brookline, Massachusetts, and I asked them about this yoga that they were doing and how they were helping people and how can I get involved in this? How can I learn more about this? I want to do this too. So I went up to Massachusetts and I did a week-long training in trauma sensitive trauma center yoga. And I learned basically how we can take these ancient tools of yoga and just shift them a little bit to work with people who have had really intense trauma and help them start to heal. And it was an absolutely amazing experience for me. Half the people who took this course were yoga teachers, half of them were psychotherapists who can use some of these tools in psychotherapy treatment or mental health treatment. And it has changed the way that I teach all my classes, because the fact is, you don't have to be working with a specifically traumatized population like post-war veterans or sexual trauma survivors. The fact is, 2 out of 3 people have experienced some sort of trauma in their life, studies show. So you never know who is in your yoga class and what they have experienced. And the fact is, these small shifts that we make in trauma-informed or trauma-sensitive yoga to the original structure of yoga are well received by most people. The language is a little bit different. Energetically, it's a little bit different. There's a real respect for a non-hierarchical approach. I do not have more power than you just because I am the teacher. The language that I use is very invitational. I'm inviting you to choose what you want to do instead of telling you what to do. And people really like it. People from all walks of life. So I pretty much teach every yoga class now through a trauma-informed lens.
That's so powerful. And as you were speaking, it took me back to my interview with Susan DeCinzi, because we talk about big T and little t trauma and how everyone's experienced some form of trauma. Some of us, it's these huge traumatic events, and for others, it's just the accumulation of smaller traumas. But this approach sounds very honoring to the person experiencing it. So, can you delve into how it benefits someone, especially if they have a history of trauma?
Absolutely. I think it's helpful to actually deconstruct what trauma is, right?
Mhm.
So, trauma is when this deeply terrifying event happens and the person has no control or power to remove themselves from it. So, we have a nervous system. When there is a stressor that comes into our environment, all these physiological things happen, heart rate increases, and we get sweaty palms, and breathing changes, and all this stuff happens. When the stressor goes away, our nervous system downregulates again. This is a normal nervous system response. It's very adaptive. When trauma occurs, it's like that stressor continues to come back even though they're not really there. So the body is having these reactions over and over and over again. And this can actually rewire the brain completely. So it affects connections between the right brain and the left brain. And when you are experiencing a traumatic event, the part of your brain that is responsible for speech completely shuts down and goes dark. So I am a huge proponent of talk therapy, and I think it's incredibly helpful and beneficial. But the fact is, no amount of talk therapy can excavate all of the trauma that still lives in someone's body because we are having these physiological responses. So through yoga, and these research studies prove it, we can help minimize those symptoms of that post-traumatic response just through this practice, through this honoring. Just like you said, it is very honoring, it is very respectful of the individual, because the goal is to restore a sense of personal power. that power and control that were lost during the experience of the trauma, we use the yoga practice, we use the language, the repetition, the relationship that we're building to help restore that person's sense of choice, personal power, and self-efficacy, knowing that they have the power to make the choice of whatever they're going to do next, even if it's just a simple movement with their arm. Every little choice helps restore that sense of personal power.
Yes, it makes so much sense to me because so often when we've experienced trauma, we lose our sense of self. We don't even know what boundaries are. And there's so much shame and even loss of autonomy. So it sounds like a beautiful way to begin to restore all of that in a really safe space.
Yep, it sure is. And it's really, really powerful to be the facilitator who is assisting this to happen. And it's so gratifying to see the changes and the growth in so many of my students. And I'm just going to comment on something that you were saying there about the lack of autonomy and that sense of disconnection. A lot of times when people have experienced trauma, their own relationship with their body changes
Yes.
because, we talk about the fight or flight response, but there's also a freeze response that happens sometimes
Yes.
where the body just completely shuts down. And that can also be very adaptive. If you can't get away from something, your body shuts down completely. You don't feel pain anymore. And you basically kind of mentally dissociate. You separate from your body. And then when that stressful experience passes, you come back in. But the relationship between mind and body is really forever changed. A lot of people can start to feel almost a sense of hatred for their own body because it's a reminder of what has been perpetrated against them. And so that was really the original motivation for these studies, looking at yoga as a possible treatment modality, because if people are hating their bodies, and yoga is all about an embodied practice, about being in touch with the body, can doing yoga help people like their bodies a little bit more again? That was that original impetus for those studies. And they found that yes, it absolutely can and does.
So, can you delve a little bit deeper into how this yoga practice can help someone to begin to have a better relationship with their body? Because so often, just in general, people have so much shame around their bodies. Women have so much shame around their bodies, whether they've had a traumatic experience or not. There's just a underlying cultural belief about who we are as women so often. So, how can working within this yoga practice help you to improve that relationship?
Well, for starters, something that you said earlier about not really knowing where our boundaries are. The studies that were done with post-war combat veterans, that training trains them to push past any boundary.
Mm,
So they lose a sense of even understanding what is too much because you're supposed to just push, keep pushing through. So with this particular type of yoga practice, this trauma-informed language, invites individuals to tap into the physical sensations that they are feeling when they are doing a particular movement. So, for example, we see in social media all these beautiful and very impressive and sometimes acrobatic pictures of people doing yoga. And yes, that can be part of what yoga is. But really, with trauma informed yoga, we're shifting the focus from what it looks like on the outside to what it feels like on the inside. And we use this beautiful word, interoception, to feel what's going on within your cellular membrane, within your body. So when we lift an arm and we lean over into a side bend, I might invite somebody to notice the sensations that you feel in your arm and in the rib cage, along the side body. Because sometimes people who have dissociated a lot can't even identify the physical sensations themselves, where they are happening. They're so disconnected from the body. So, with my language, I'm inviting them back into the body to just notice without any judgment or criticism. What you're noticing is not good or bad, you're just noticing sensations. Then I'm also encouraging a sense of choice based on what you feel. So once people are able to start identifying and feeling those physical sensations, you get to decide, do I want to go a little deeper in my stretch? Do I want to back off a little bit if it feels like it's too deep? Or is it feeling just right? I have that control. I get to decide every step of the way what I'm going to do next. And there's always an invitation. So when you take, for example, a traditional yoga class in a yoga studio, the teacher might tell you, inhale, bring your arms up, exhale, take a fold forward, lift your right arm, lift your left leg. And it becomes very prescriptive. They're telling you what to do. In a trauma-informed practice, you are requested. Maybe you would like to fold forward, and if it feels right, you might lift your right arm and lean over. And when you feel ready, you can bring yourself to a seated position. So every single moment is a choice, which, as I said before, restores that individual's personal sense of power and efficacy over themselves. I get to decide what I'm doing. And it translates off the mat into the rest of the world. I have a student, and through the work that we have done on the mat, identifying boundaries. Sometimes you come into a hip opener stretch and your hips just say, no, we're not going any further. And that's okay. So there's also an element of self-acceptance and self-compassion. There's nothing wrong with my hips. They just don't want to bend that way. And I accept that. So this is where my limit is. I've identified it. I'm going to gently work within it. And watching this woman in her everyday life over a couple of months of work together, she has reported to me that at her job, where she used to get loaded up with more work than she could handle, but she didn't know how to advocate for herself and she would just accept it and then be resentful, she is learning how to identify her boundaries and say, I'm so sorry, but I'm not going to be able to do that now. And put herself first and not feel like she's weak or ineffective or not a good employee. And it's just been amazing to watch her personal growth.
So, through this listening of the body, which as the conversations are evolving in the podcast, it's coming down to the importance of that. We all want to be heard, but so often we don't listen to our own bodies. So, in this listening of the body and the emotions that can even get stored within the body, it's allowing someone to really begin to understand what their needs are. And it can transfer into their everyday life of setting those emotional boundaries, not just physical boundaries, but emotional boundaries, relationship boundaries. Yes?
Absolutely. We are a mind and a body. Remember, the original definition of yoga is to yoke together the mind and the body. I think in our culture, we think of ourselves as this brain that's just carrying around this body with us, sort of dragging it with us, when in fact, we are all of it. And if you think about how the mind can affect the body in terms of illness, the body can affect the mind. I mean, it's this incredible relationship, but we are one whole unit. And it's a rediscovery of that interconnectedness of ourselves. The left brain is the more cerebral, intellectual, logical. The right brain is the more intuitive, feeling side. We live in a culture that really honors the left brain. So we're not getting a lot of messages from the outside to feel, to be. Everything is about doing and going.
Yes,
So
yes.
this practice really helps on so many different levels to help kind of work against those cultural pressures that we feel and don't even realize, to come to a place of wholeness and self-acceptance.
That's really powerful. And I feel like, especially in this coronavirus pandemic, for some, there is some boredom because they can't go out and they can't go do. For others, they're used to being at home and working from home, and it's not a big change other than you can't really go anywhere. We're so trained to be doing, doing, doing. And for some, again, they're bored. I can't go out. I can't do anything because they're used to doing and they're not used to just being at home and being still. Or the focus is more external all the time and not as internal. And learning to take this time to be is so invaluable. And for some, even if you're self employed, because we have to change our direction, we can't meet with other people. There's this drive like, oh my gosh, I have to do. Or for families that are still working full time and have to school their children online, there's just so much pressure. And I feel like what you're describing, to take this time just to be still and go within and honor the body and listen to the body and give ourselves a break, because especially if you have experienced trauma, this whole pandemic is almost the perfect storm to re-trigger trauma, because it's constant flight or fight, so much uncertainty. We don't know what's going to be happening.
Right. We have no control, essentially.
Right.
This is the definition of trauma, is when you have lost all power and all control. So I can see how this could be very re-triggering for many individuals. And sitting with uncertainty is probably the biggest lesson that we all are learning right now, that we don't have control. And it is this kind of collective experience. We're all experiencing it, which really speaks to one element of trauma-informed yoga, which is that there is no hierarchy between the teacher and the student, or rather the facilitator. We don't even call ourselves a teacher. We're a facilitator, facilitating this experience because we're doing it together. In a trauma-informed yoga class, the instructor or facilitator will do the practice along with everybody else, because we are equals. We are experiencing this together. So yes, during this pandemic, I think it's really important for people to learn how to be. And that said, for somebody who has experienced trauma, the idea to just be in your body, we make it sound simple. But remember, there's this kind of adverse relationship with the body because of the traumas that have happened, especially if there was a physical trauma.
Exactly.
And that's why the relationship with the facilitator or the instructor is so important, to create safe and healthy relationships as part of the process of healing from trauma. And that has been really difficult for me as a teacher, to not be able to connect with my students. And I don't do hands-on adjustments anymore. In a small group of students that I've been working with for a long time, I may, and I always ask permission, and I always give everyone the option to opt out.
Yes, that's so important. So important.
Yes, absolutely. And actually, I'm thinking about doing a different method of giving that power and that control, because right now I'll ask. If anybody doesn't want hands-on adjustments, I absolutely respect that. Please feel free to raise your hand and wave me off, and I'll usually put them in a position where their head is down so nobody can see anybody else, and there's no sense of, oh, somebody's looking at me, you're going to judge my decision. But the thing is, throughout the class, someone might change their mind.
Mm-hmm.
They might start out saying, oh, I don't want that hands-on adjustment. I don't want you to touch me. And then they look up and they see me giving some gentle, loving touch to someone. And then they think, oh, actually, that looks really nice. I might want that after all. So I'm going to make a card, kind of like a business card, that on one side says, yes, please. And on the other side, it says, no, thank you. And they can put it up at the corner of their mat. And if they change their mind throughout, they can just flip the card over.
That's beautiful.
Yes.
That's beautiful.
Just another way to restore that sense of choice, and that it's okay to change your mind. It's okay, whatever it is that you're feeling in any moment, it's okay. And knowing that it's going to change. That goes for all of us. That goes for all of our emotional states. Whatever it is that we are feeling in any given moment, we know that it isn't going to last. It's going to change. And maybe we can find some sense of comfort in that. And that's why when I did that anger workout with my daughter, it was so helpful to remind her, hey, it's okay that you feel this way right now. It's not going to last forever, but let's put it somewhere. Let's do something with it. Let's get rid of it. And then we can come back to that state of being.
Mm-hmm. Give it outlet. Just give it outlet. I think too, so often we're taught as children just to shove our emotions down. Or I find it interesting, sometimes parents expect more out of their children, behavior wise, feeling wise, emotion wise, than they do out of the adults around them. And it's an interesting observation. And so teaching our children how to honor what they're feeling and be able to give it outlet, just to walk with it, to feel it, to honor it, and then allow it to pass. And I love what you're saying too about the permission to change our mind. Because so often as children, we aren't even, I don't know if taught is the right word, but it's like, you made that decision, you made your bed, now you have to lie in it. And there's not that freedom to, you know what, this isn't working for me. I'm going to change my mind. Or as you're talking about how you teach, oh, I'm starting to have a relationship with her. I feel like I can trust her to help me to adjust my body, and that her touch might be safe. Because with traumas, we don't even feel safe being touched by someone.
That's right.
So, what you're describing, it's making me kind of teary even as I sit with it, because I can feel, I don't know if power is the right word, but there is something to that, to create that safe space, to begin to listen to the body. Because you're right, those of us that have experienced trauma, sometimes we don't want to feel what's in our body, especially if we've been shoving all those emotions down, but they'll manifest some way else. Digestive complaints, backache, it can run the gamut.
Absolutely.
I can really feel the power of what you're saying.
So, through the studies at the Trauma Center, they actually received reports from some of the people who were taking these classes that even though there wasn't any touch within the classes themselves, that these individuals reported feeling ready and able to receive safe touch from others outside of the class.
Wow.
So, what they gained from trauma informed yoga and their own relationship of safety in their own body allowed them to feel safe in situations with others. Really, really incredible.
Yeah, I can feel that as you've been speaking. So, can you expand a bit into this concept of having choice? Because right now, with all the uncertainty, we can feel like we don't have any choice. Everything feels so out of control. Yet, in moments, we do have the opportunity to make a choice in each moment.
We do. And we also have the choice to accept ourselves in whatever choice that we make.
Yes, yes.
Right? I don't know about you, but I've been experiencing a lot of duality throughout this, that there are a lot of really sad and heavy things that are happening. And then there's also some really good things that are coming from this. I saw a beautiful picture of the Taj Mahal and mountains in India that haven't been able to be seen in years and years because of the pollution.
Yes, I saw that.
Right? So there are some really great things that are happening at the same time that there are some really heavy and negative things happening. There are days that I feel super energized. I'm going to go work in the garden. I'm going to do this. I'm going to clean this corner of my house that hasn't had attention in 10 years. And then there are days that I just feel very lethargic and unmotivated. and giving myself the space to feel whatever I feel in that moment. As we were just saying, that feelings will pass, and not feeling like I'm a failure or feeling lethargic makes me lazy or whatever, but knowing I need to feel this right now and it's okay. So I'm going to choose to allow myself to have these few moments, hours a day of downtime, whatever it is. And then when the feeling shifts, make a different choice. And understanding that none of it defines who you are. What we feel is not who we are. And I really like to use language for this as well. I am not angry. I am feeling anger, or I am experiencing anger. I am not sad. I am feeling sadness or experiencing sadness. To really help us understand that those feelings do not define us, doesn't make us a bad person. There is no hierarchy. It is what it is, and it will pass.
Yes, if we give it space to pass and honor it and listen to it, I think it doesn't pass again when we try to shove it down or we tell a story about the emotion that we're feeling. I am feeling angry. I'm feeling frustrated. And then we can tell ourselves a story around it. Oh, I shouldn't be feeling that way. Or I'm wrong because I'm angry. Whereas if we would just take the moment to honor I'm feeling this emotion of anger. What's under it? What is my body wanting to tell me? What is my spirit even wanting to tell me? And taking that moment to pause if we can and listen. And then if we can make adjustments around it to do that, that maybe it's time to stop listening to the news, or if you're in a call, there's so many webinars right now. And if you're just inundated and tired, then it's okay to pause it and stop. Does that make sense what I'm saying?
Yes, absolutely. We're meeting ourselves where we are in any given moment. And that's where that self compassion really comes in.
Yes, I think that's especially needed right now. So, do you have any little tools that someone could use? Because part of what we're talking about is sometimes it's called returning to center, sometimes it's self regulation, just honoring what you're feeling in your body. Oh, I'm tense. Let me observe my body. Let me feel my body. My jaw's tight. My shoulders are tight. If we're in fight or flight, often our pelvic floor is tight. Just observing our body and taking a moment to take some breaths. Can you elaborate on that a bit, or a tool you really like?
Well, breath is really, breath is like the foundation of our yoga practice. Breath is the foundation of our life. Again, yoga linking mind and body. Sometimes I also think of that word to yoke or to link between breath, mind, and body. The breath itself can be the link. Even 5 deep breaths have a very powerful effect on down regulating the nervous system. So bringing an overactive nervous system, that stress response, back down to baseline. And that's incredible. It's free. You can do this anytime. To take a deep breath in through the nose, filling up the belly so the belly will expand outward as you breathe in. And then slowly releasing that breath. Maybe even making it sound like a sigh,
Yes.
like a sigh of relief. Even the sound of the breath can be relaxing here. And another thing I'd like to add based on what you were saying before this is to maybe even think about yourself when you're having an emotional experience the way that you would think about a friend who is having that experience. So often we are our own worst critic, and
Yes.
the expectations we have of ourselves are so harsh
Yes.
compared to if it were actually someone that we knew that were feeling this way. How would we comfort a friend? How would we speak to a friend who was going through these feelings and these emotions? And can we turn that lens onto ourselves and remind ourselves, hey, I am actually my own best friend. And I kind of forgot. So let me treat myself that way. Let me make myself the most important person, not in a self-centered way, but you have to live with yourself for the rest of your life. So to learn how to actually be nice to yourself, to have compassion with yourself, meet yourself where you are is really, really important.
I think it's invaluable. Most of us say things to ourselves that we would never speak that way to our friends, but we do to ourselves. And it's programming that gets into our subconscious when we can learn to just take that step back. Because so often I think people, just like you're talking about, people aren't aware of their bodies. We're disconnected from our thoughts. We're so used to thinking so quickly, so quickly, so quickly. We're not even aware of our self-talk and how negative or even mean it can be at times.
Yes, that inner critic can be very, very harsh. And I think you're right about feeling disconnected from our thoughts. We talk about a train of thought, right? And I really like this metaphor because I literally see a train coming into the station. And I think most of us feel like that train of thought is just going on its own and we're just taking a ride on the train. But we don't realize that we are actually the ones driving the train. And this is where some of the tools of yoga and meditation can be really helpful to teach you how to focus the mind and shift your focus to be able to take the reins of where you want your thoughts to go. So, especially for those who get caught up in negative patterns of thinking, it's habitual. It isn't who you are, and you're not destined to be a negative thinker forever. But just like going to the gym and training your muscles to work in different ways, training your thoughts to work in different ways takes practice. That's why we call this a meditation practice or a yoga practice. It's not a meditation perfect, it's a meditation practice. So, you have to actually work at it. And it starts with identifying those negative thoughts, just like when we're doing our trauma informed yoga and identifying what we're feeling in the body. So, starting to notice without judgment, like, oh, wow, I was just really mean to myself with that thing that I thought in my mind, pausing right there and rewriting the script, deciding to communicate in a different way. I'm also a big fan of positive affirmations.
Yes.
It can feel really fake and forced for people when we start to do this. Like, what am I just brainwashing myself with this positivity stuff? I'm actually feeling really negative right now. And I'm going to say that life is great or, whatever positive thing I'm saying. Here's the thing about the brain that is so fascinating to me. Over the last 15 or 20 years, neuroscience research has found that where we used to believe that the brain was just this fixed entity that did not change, we are now finding that neuroplasticity, the ability to change the wiring of your brain to grow new brain cells, is a real thing. And part of it begins with shifting our thoughts.
Exactly.
So by identifying those negative thoughts, stopping there and rewriting, overwriting a new script will retrain your brain to a new reality. So especially now, during this time of this COVID-19 pandemic, one of my favorite affirmations that I've always used, but seems especially relevant now is, I don't know what's coming next, but I know that I can handle it.
Right. Because I've worked with families with affirmations. There's an affirmation that we have been working with. I have everything I need within me to do this work.
Yeah.
And you may not even know what that work is going to be and how you're going to handle it. But there is this, what word do I want? It creates this resiliency of, I have everything I need within me to figure this out. I have everything I need within me to do this work. And that might involve finding other resources, learning different modalities, meditation, yoga, but we do have it within us to do this work. And one of the things is I've worked with families and clients with affirmations for years and years. It's important, I feel, to make an affirmation first person and to avoid, if possible, using the word not, because the subconscious is unable to register the word not. So if I say, don't think about a purple rabbit,
All you hear is purple rabbit.
your brain's, all you
Yes.
hear is purple rabbit. For example, if you say, I will not be afraid, your subconscious is going to hear afraid. I'm afraid. But also, if there's an affirmation that you really resonate with, but it feels like such a stretch, there's so much power in I'm willing to believe. I'm willing to believe that I have everything I need within me to navigate this pandemic. And if that is a stretch, you can step back even further into I'm willing to believe that I have everything I need within me to navigate this pandemic.
Belief is a choice, right?
Mm-hmm.
We choose to believe something because we don't actually know for sure. That's why it's a belief and not a truth. So, who's to say that you don't have everything within you? Why would somebody veer toward that choice versus believing that they do have everything within them? And I think we live in a culture that encourages us to look outside of ourselves for validation.
Yes.
We ask the teacher, we ask the boss, we ask the parents, we ask somebody else, and we don't listen to our own inner wisdom. We're taught to believe that we get the wisdom from everybody else from the outside, but at a certain point, you've gained a lot of wisdom from the outside and you've integrated that into who you are. And it's time to start turning inward, to sit and listen to that inner voice, and to just kind of bring it back to what we were saying earlier about listening to the body. For me, often there's a real element of feeling it in my body. So I might think something cerebrally, and then I'm going to allow myself to feel where that is in my body. And we may call this having an intuition or a gut feeling. Even that language is tied to the body.
Yes.
So my brain might tell me that, oh, yeah, this seems like a really great situation or a great deal. Go ahead and move forward. But something's not sitting right in my gut. And for me personally, I really do feel it in the gut. And to tie back to yogic philosophy and chakra theory, that there are 7 energetic centers in the body that are aligned along the spine. The one that is right, in fact, at the gut, the solar plexus chakra, is all about our sense of self, our personal identity, our willpower, and our inner strength. So that's where it lives for me. I feel things in my stomach, and if it doesn't feel right, I have learned to just not move forward with that.
Yes, it's learning to trust our gut and that we can trust our gut. I think that even gets trained out of us as children, that as children, we are more instinctual. We need boundaries to know our safety limits, but intrinsically, children and babies, they're better able to listen. And then as we grow up, and I'm not saying it happens to everyone, but very often it's, well, why are you feeling like that? Or, no, that's not right. And slowly it just begins to erode, or that ability to trust our gut and what we're feeling, because people put their perceptions on what they think is right and what we should be feeling.
And we do that to ourselves too, right?
Yes, yes, because it gets that programming in our subconscious. Exactly.
We judge ourselves, we judge our thoughts, and that is where a yoga practice, especially a trauma-informed yoga practice, can help us to remove the judgment and just make it about observation. Just step back and notice what's happening, even in a trauma response. Okay, right? We talked about how when somebody has experienced a big trauma, they can be re-triggered by things that are not the original stressor, but create the same physiological response in the body.
Right.
So to be able to step back and say, Okay, my heart is pounding. Okay, it's harder to breathe right now. Okay, that's just, it's happening. Let me tap into my toolbox now that I've been practicing. Let me take some deep breaths. Let me look around the room where I am. Let me identify all the things I see that are green or all the things I see that are square, just as a way to get grounded in this present reality. Let me feel the ground under my feet, or let me feel the chair underneath my seat. All these threads of sensory input to help keep you tethered in this present moment. We have a lot of tools that we can use and that we can practice. And this is why I feel so gratified to do this work and to help people grow their personal toolbox, to meet themselves without judgment and accept who they are and what they're feeling in any given moment.
Yes, yes. Can we touch a little bit on how this would be beneficial in pregnancy and childbirth?
Any elements of yoga would be, right? Just deep breathing and focus and concentration and self acceptance. But, again, what makes trauma informed yoga so different is the invitational nature, that you're not telling yourself that you have to do anything, that you have the choice to do what feels right, and noticing the sensations in the body. So, how does that translate to pregnant women? Feeling what's going on in your body and inviting choice. How does that relate to pregnant women? I almost feel like you're more qualified to answer that than I am?
Well, I think for women with a history of trauma and they're giving birth, it's such a vulnerable time in your life. Prenatal yoga is so valuable, but if you have a history of trauma, working with someone that's trauma informed and from what you're describing and how it can transform that sense of self, how it can create boundaries, that must translate over into your ability to advocate for yourself in your pregnancy and while giving birth, and to know how to self regulate and return to center. Because what happens when women are in labor, we go into that more altered state, that labor land, or if we don't feel safe. Yes, we can go into fight or flight, but like you mentioned, so often women go into freeze.
Mm.
So if they were working with you and had these tools with this trauma informed yoga, I feel like it could be such an incredible, incredible resource to navigate your birth and your pregnancy and even postpartum.
Definitely postpartum, in terms of that sense of self acceptance. And again, knowing the boundaries, knowing the limits, knowing that you don't have to do it all.
Yes.
You can take the time to be and not judge yourself for that. It doesn't mean you're lazy. It doesn't mean you're a bad person. It means that these are the ebbs and the flows that we feel every day, and that it's okay to have an up moment and to have a down moment. I mean, think about a heartbeat. A heart beats and then there's a rest, and then it beats and then there's a rest. And that's really, when you think of the ebb and flow of your own day or your own energy, it's perfectly normal. This is exactly how it should be.
Yes. It sounds like the basis or a tenet of this is really getting into this place of walking with what is and creating self acceptance and meeting yourself and the world with compassion and kindness.
Absolutely. So, in yogic philosophy, when I was talking earlier about those 8 limbs, not just breath and movement, there are others as well. The yamas and the niyamas are essentially moral observances. So, I think of it as ways to be a good person. And ahimsa, nonviolence, is one of the first ones. Being kind, not only to others, but also to yourself. And that goes back to that inner critic and taming that inner critic inside of you.
Yes. Yes. And then we don't pass it down to our children, right?
Yep,
If we can learn to do that, we can model that. And that's really what's going to transform the world.
absolutely. And even more powerful, working with children. I also am a kindergarten yoga teacher. So
Oh, how fun.
I teach these tools to 5-year-olds.
Oh, wonderful.
And it is so incredible to think about a world where children are taught tools for emotional self-regulation and
Yes.
self-acceptance at such a young age. It's just amazing.
I have goosebumps. I have goosebumps.
Yeah,
Yes.
these little people are amazing. They are my best teachers, and it's incredible to hear them tell me how they showed their mom, or they showed their brother, or they're doing their physical poses, or their mudras, their hand symbols, or they're saying their mantras. I am so calm. I am so calm. I am so calm. I mean, really, this is amazing work, and it's an honor for me to do it.
Yes, there's so much power in this. Thank you so much for taking the time to share the wisdom and the beauty of this practice. So, if there were something that you really want to leave the listeners with, the birthies families with, what would that be?
I would say meet yourself where you are. Know that whatever it is that you're feeling isn't lasting forever, that you are perfectly imperfect, exactly as you are, and that every day that you exist is a new opportunity to learn more about yourself and accept whatever that may be.
Yes, thank you. So, if someone wanted to reach out to you for classes, I imagine you're starting to do them virtually now, but if they want to reach out to you, how can they do that?
Well, there's a few different ways people can find me. If they like social media, I'm on Instagram and Facebook under the handle Light Your Inner Glow, or they can always visit my website at www.lightyourinnerglow.com.
Oh, I love the name of that. That's perfect. So, and you also are a co host on a radio show as well?
I am. So I call into a radio show up in New Hampshire. Once a week, I am the health and wellness expert on the Jen Larsen talk radio show, and my segment is called Toxic Tuesday. We've been talking about different elements of the environment that can harm and endanger our health, but quite honestly, I think I'm getting ready to rename it Transformation Tuesday.
Oh, I love that. I love that. Because that's really what it's all about, isn't it?
Absolutely. Through our choices that we make with what we eat, what we surround ourselves with, and the thoughts that we put into our minds, we have the power to transform. It's always our choice.
Yes. Yes. Thank you so much for this time together. It's been, again, the word I keep going back to is just power. Powerful. I can feel the transformational power of what you do in this trauma informed yoga work.
It has been my pleasure to be here. I'm so honored and grateful to you. And it is an honor to hold space for people and to help guide them through this practice. So thank you again for giving me the opportunity to share what I know and love with you and your listeners.
Thank you. Thank you so much. My guests and I truly appreciate you listening. And if you're enjoying the show, please share it with a friend. And you can rate, review, and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Because when you do, that helps get the show and the information out to more people. And please remember, there is support out there for you. I am offering virtual sessions, and my Birthies Method Childbirth Education course is available online with video chat sessions, and it includes instruction on the creating of a relaxation habit, something I feel we all really need right now. And it also includes the audio recordings to practice with. Many prayers and much love to you all.
For more great conversations like these, or to find out more information and access Michelle's library of amazing guests, go to birthieservices.com/podcast. For more information on the Birthies method, Michelle's classes, meditations, and other services, go to birthyservices.com.